Hey, welcome back to the live stream. It's a Thursday live stream. It's a Thursday third day. It's a Saturday third chatting, talking, whispering on Thursdays.
Thursdays? We can go with that.
With 30 Thursdays, ladies and gentlemen. 30 for 30. Well, I want to welcome to the show a friend of the show. You know him, you love him. It's Michael Tracy. He's a self-described roving journalist. He's been on top of the Russiagate scandal from day one, and he's here to talk about it and gloat a little bit. Michael Tracy, how are you?
Hey, Jimmy, doing well. I think I should stop self-describing as roving journalist because it just confuses people.
Yes.
But whatever. Also, I don't necessarily want to gloat. I mean, people are going to accuse me of gloating no matter what I say because, yes, this has been an intense focus of mine since the start, and I want to follow up on why I think this narrative was so harmful, and that's now easier to do with the benefit of hindsight, although it should have been obvious all along. But people were still going to characterize that as gloating. I don't really exactly accept that. Although, if you want, Jimmy, we can have a no collusion dance party.
I've noticed people trying to tone police me on my gloating, and I find that fucking hilarious. That is just like, you are such an asswipe. Go away.
Well, I mean, listen, it is prudent to have some epistemic humility. Right.
Yes.
So don't be ostentatious and say, I told you so. But at the same time, if you were correct about something against which there was a huge onslaught of conformity, then I think you have earned the right, not so much to gloat, but to say, hey, maybe the insights that I've been trying to provide for a long time now are worth your listening to.
And Michael, you are a very insightful guy, and you notice a lot of things that other people don't. But what I've been saying about this Russiagate is that it doesn't take, as Greg Pallas said on our show, it doesn't take a great investigative journalist. I'm not a great investigative journalist. I'm not even a good one. It doesn't take an investigative journalist to look at this story and see it for what it is. This was bullshit from day one. This was a hoax. It was printed. It was printed in the book Shattered that Robbie Mook and John Podesta came up with this whole thing, and everybody ignored that. Did they not?
I know, it's amazing. You know, now that this Doomsday Mueller report came out and it's causing an existential crisis for all the people that we've hated for 3 years, it's it's both satisfying and an opportunity to kind of step back and look at it more broadly, because with the frenzy of Russiagate, there's been so many twists and turns and subplots and character arcs that it can be challenging to kind of put it in a longer perspective. But I was reflecting, and I mentioned this on the Red Scare podcast, which is like the greatest podcast of all time. I don't know if you're aware of it. You got to listen to it, Jimmy. You'd love it.
It's called the Red Scare podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, I
don't even want to try to describe it, but it's the best.
Okay, I'll check it out. I haven't heard
It's like the only good podcast now, frankly.
I have a podcast.
Ladies.
What do you say?
I know, but so it's you and them that are the only good ones. So
you don't like that Chapo Trap House one?
I got sick of it a long time ago. I have nothing against those guys, but I don't know. We don't have to get into it. It's going to cause a lot of intra podcast drama here in New York City.
Please, let's not have that. Let's not have that. I whenever I listen to them, I thought those guys were funny. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, they are funny. It's just I can't be bothered anymore. No offense. Like, it's not that I have anything against them, but
okay.
I'm just a Red Scare stan.
Okay, got you. Well, I wanted to show that you.
No, I was going to lead up to a point. Let's get to that, but I wanted to just say really quickly that the reason why I brought up Red Scare is because I mentioned this on the show with them. I remember sitting on my computer in July of 2016. I can almost give you the exact date when the Russian narrative was congealing into existence. And it was these liberal journalists, along with Democrats, these guys who were friends, all of a sudden started churning out this Trump is compromised by Putin narrative in its very, very early stages. So before it was fully formed, before it encompassed everything that it came to encompass. But which is just to say that you could see it forming right before your very eyes, and you could see it forming on the basis of fallacies. So that's why this whole thing has been so maddening, because I saw it start on false pretenses, like the Iraq War, sold on false pretenses. This was also sold on false pretenses, and it was so obvious from the very beginning. And yet, when you pointed this out, you felt like you were crazy. It was almost like gaslighting, which is a horrible term that I don't use except when I'm being ironic. But the traditional definition of gaslighting would apply to what it felt to be pointing out that farce every step of this way. I mean, as a former Young Turks employee, Jimmy, you could probably attest. There was a lot of inner dissension whenever people who are more or of our disposition brought it up. And maybe we could talk about that a little more later. I don't know if you want to go down that road, but it should be gone down at some point.
No, I was
Anyway.
I was dismissed. My reporting on that was dismissed, and it hasn't been championed. That's for sure. Cenk Uygur, although the main show, he says he didn't get it. Whatever he said, but Anna Kasparian has admitted that they got it wrong and pushed this narrative, and now Cenk is pushing a different Russian conspiracy of Trump's, and it's a different one. But to his credit, you turn on NBC or MSNBC or CNN, there's no show on there devoted to debunking Russiagate. So Cenk Uygur on his own platform let me do a show where I debunked it. It would be, and so I guess that's all you could ask for. And now you know how this usually goes, Michael. Nobody likes someone. No, you're not being hired. Your phone's not ringing, even though you've been doing great journalism on this and you got this story right. Any other story that you got right like this, your phone would be ringing off the hook. But nobody wants a guy around a newsroom that reminds them that they got something wrong, right?
Yeah, and I should also say, to Cenk's credit, I did have relative autonomy when I was at the Young Turks to say and do, essentially what I wanted, and my beliefs about this issue were well known. So it's not as if he tried to impose any restrictions on me ever.
Right.
At the same time, he does seem as though he's whitewashing history when people were circulating a clip that I forgot about from 2017 when he was on some panel discussion and he addressed me by name.
I remember that.
Michael Tracy's
I
got
called
the
you about
blinders
that.
on. He's not, he's ignoring reality. Trump's going to be marched out of the White House in handcuffs. And there was a tweet that somebody just sent me from last summer, 2018, when Cenk said, yes, there was collusion. So now he's trying to concoct this kind of post hoc rationalization where he was never on board with collusion when it just doesn't fly. I mean, we have the evidence. I just wish he would admit fault and then move on. But they're just digging in even further. And it's just, I don't know. It's sad.
It would seem to, again, he could claim victory and just point to our show. And which actually is a victory, and it's no doubt about it. It's not spin. He actually did something no one else did in media. He gave a show a platform that debunked the Russiagate narrative. And again, it's amazing that I could debunk it, and you could debunk it, and Kyle Kalinske could debunk it, and guys like Tim Black, and Caitlin Johnstone, and Ben Norton, and Max Blumenthal, and Aaron Matei, and I think that's everybody. Because
Glenn, let's not forget Glenn.
I'm sorry, of course, Glenn Greenwald. I always leave him out because he's already such an exalted
Daddy Greenwald.
But again, it doesn't. We don't have we don't have any special resources that those other companies don't have. They have millions of dollars. No. They have millions of dollars in resources. We have no resources, and yet I was able to talk to reporters, experts. I was able to talk to Bill Binney. Any of these shows ever have Bill Binney on? Any of these shows ever have anybody on that could debunk this? Ever have even Craig Murray on? Ever even have me on, or you on, or Aaron Matei? They've never, and to me, that's the worst thing that the news media did, was they didn't bring on a counter narrative.
And that's a grounds on which we can claim some semblance of vindication, right? Because it's not as if you or I or Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi or Aaron Mate or any of these people had any special information that anybody was feeding us, right? It's not as if we were getting these secret scoops from our sources deep within the intel community. We were just using our basic skills of discernment and skepticism.
Yeah.
And that was enough for us to be able to glean that this narrative was totally phony. So, yeah, that I feel like is reason to say that, okay, we now have standing to say, I mean, we have a baseline of skepticism and incredulity, which others should emulate. And you said my phone's not been ringing off the hook. That's true, but at the same time, I have to say it's a strange experience. But I have gotten a bunch of mainstream recognition just within the past couple of days. I don't know how to quite feel about it. Like I got a reference positively in a New York Times column, Vanity Fair, Jacobin had a really good piece that's not mainstream, but that referenced me nicely. I've gotten a couple writing offers. I just had a piece published today in Fortune magazine. I'm writing for something for BuzzFeed, believe it or not. So there are opportunities actually. And maybe a tide is turning in some respect. I have a sneaking suspicion that the media is just going to lapse into its bad old habits eventually. But I have to say there are some people who are recognizing the validity of what I've been saying, and that's gratifying. And I hope I can acknowledge that without gloating.
Well, here, I just wanted to put Glenn Greenwald tweeted this out. He says, if you compare the propaganda, falsehoods, deceit, and lies you were fed for 3 years by glittery cable stars who made many millions of dollars a year to the brave skepticism and smart dissent of YouTube hosts like Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore, it tells you all you need to know. I got to tell you, that was a big day for me when I read that. When I saw that, that was a super big day for me when I saw.
Yeah, I mean. Our little Russiagate skepticism caucus that we've kind of organically developed over the course of 3 years is having a fun couple of days and praising each other. But we're not praising each other for like base careerist reasons, right? Or we're not doing it just to flatter one another. We're doing it because, we actually gave one another sanity.
Right.
Over the course of this 3 years when it was oftentimes very alienating, I have to say, to be attacked as I was. And I'm not a victim. I'm not trying to say anybody should feel bad for me. I'm just telling you objectively that I incurred a lot of hostility and abuse. And I'm not hostility or abuse to the point where I would want like the Twitter authorities to intervene and like protect me, right? I'm just saying that was my lived experience. And it was because of guys like, you and Glenn and Matt and other people where we could like mutually reassure each other that we weren't going crazy. And it was really useful, which is why we're now in this position where we're saying, yes, we want to give credit to this little group that kind of developed because we were such an extreme minority that, again, it gave a lot of solace to know that there were people who we regarded as intelligent who had kind of come to the same conclusion independently of one another, but yet could kind of coalesce and provide mutual support.
So you tweeted this out, which I loved. You said, it will take years to fully process the true scope, the media failure on Russia. The scale of this malfeasance is breathtaking. I have eternal contempt for these self-interested, cynical frauds who deceive the public for profit and political gain. Malignant scumbags, you said. This is an unmitigated disaster for Democrats and their media boosters, and anyone claiming otherwise is lying. Now, and then let me go on to all the nervous media people getting ready to insist that Mueller's apparent failure to uncover a Trump-Russia conspiracy is no big deal. You are liars. You are frauds. You were wrong from the beginning, and you will be held accountable. And it looks like you don't want to get a job at Mother Jones anytime soon because they're still pushing this. They're still pushing it. This is one of the biggest scumbags in journalism. His name is David Corn. And if you want to see the opposite of integrity, go look at David Corn and Mother Jones, because they're doing some of the worst work in the history of Mother Jones right now. So, what do you have to say?
Mother Jones, Mother Jones and David Corn are just despicable, and I don't even have the words to capture it. David Corn, I doubt you're ever going to listen to this, but if somebody who knows you is listening to this or watching this and could pass along my message, I just want to tell you that you are a contemptible journalistic fraud. You should resign, disgrace, and you should find a different line of work because the damage you helped contribute to on the body politic is just unforgivable. He was on the Chris Hayes show the day after, or 24 or 48 hours after Mueller's findings came down, and he and his co-author Michael Isikoff of this book Russian Roulette conceded that the Steele dossier, this document, which contained all this salacious, incendiary information on Trump, it caused everybody to have these juvenile fantasies about Trump getting caught in a golden shower with pee running down his face or something. I mean, the kind of just sick, depraved stuff that is like middle school bathroom chatter or whatever. David Corn was the most central journalist linked to the Steele dossier along with Michael Isikoff, although to Michael Isikoff's credit, he was a little more skeptical throughout, although I still hold him in contempt in a way as well. But David Corn, he's been pushing the most maximalist conspiratorial version of the story from the very outset where, Trump betrayed America and he's an asset and all that crap. And he's been now trying to backpedal, just like Jenkins said that he was never on board with collusion. When anybody with Google or like the Twitter search function or an MSNBC, a working memory of MSNBC can go and find when he was promulgating collusion more than almost anybody in the media. And this is somebody who supposedly has standing among progressives, being the flagship guy at Mother Jones. So it's him that I put blame on for swindling not just the kind of typical normal Democrat MSNBC viewer, but for like people who think that they're following Mother Jones and getting a progressive perspective on politics. He swindled them, and it's disgusting, and he's still in denial, and he's going to try to move on and evade accountability. It just can't happen, or else something like this is going to recur in the not too distant future, and it just can't happen.
But Michael, they're already circling the wagons around each other. Ro Khanna already defended Rachel Maddow on Twitter. The Washington Post already wrote an article defending Rachel Maddow's reporting on this and saying that she's now a victim of Trump supporters because of her meticulous and thorough reporting. Did you see that?
I did see that. I believe what you're referring to is a column written by Margaret Sullivan, who's the former public editor of the New York Times and then moved to the Washington Post. Pre-2016, Margaret Sullivan did great service at the New York Times. I mean, she actually held the reporters and editors at the New York Times accountable for when they committed errors. And yet now, she's going around saying that it's, quote, bullying.
Yes.
To suggest that the journalists who propagated this false, fraudulent, despicable narrative for 3 years, to hold them accountable and to say that they should atone for their vast, damaging mistakes, that's bullying? No, bullying is when you're in, ninth grade and you tug on somebody's ear or something, or you slam their locker door shut. It's not bullying when a professional journalist has his or her record assessed critically and then are challenged on the veracity of their claims. That's not bullying. That's what a marker of a healthy society. And it should happen. It should happen much more vociferously than it is because, they all got it wrong. So now they're all going to, circle the wagons and pretend like nothing happened. My favorite meme right now is that, all these disgusting little online journo freak people is what I call them, who like live in Brooklyn mostly or DC or like select enclaves on the West Coast who, are progressive and they have this ironic detachment posture online and everything. Maybe they criticize like Louise Mensch and the Krasensteins and some of the more like obviously preposterous online resistance grifters who pushed the Russian narrative, but they never really engaged in the substance. I mean, the reason why I and Aaron Monte and Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi and, a couple others incurred so much hostility is because, day in and day out, week in and week out, we engage with the substance of this narrative. And it was twisted as Trump apologia.
Yes.
When what it turns out is that the real Trump apologists, the real Trump, quote, defenders, I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of times I've been accused of being a Trump defender for 3 years. When it turns out that people like David Corn, Cenk, I'm sorry to say, others, no, you are the Trump defenders. You were the Trump apologists. You gave Trump an ultimate vindication.
Yes.
Right now, he's going to use as a political weapon against Democrats every single 2020 Democratic candidate except Tulsi Gabbard, who I interviewed in New Hampshire, as you know, Jimmy. We did an extended interview in part about how she ended up being the one Democratic candidate, including Bernie. Again, sorry to say, he indulged in it as well. Tulsi was the one candidate who didn't engage in this bullshit and suggest that Trump was Putin's puppet, that he was like in hock to a foreign power, because it was not ever evidence-based, it was emotion-based. So now Trump is in a position where he has extraordinary political leverage over the entire field of candidates running against him.
Yes.
Because they've been pushing a narrative that's now been totally discredited and revealed as a farce. So you who push this, you are the Trump defenders. I was saying we need a rational and evidence-based opposition to Trump, not an opposition that's mired in this delusional conspiratorial fantasy. So you were Trump's best friends all along. You're the apologists. You're the defenders. You should apologize.
Michael, very well said. That's exactly right. And I tried to explain it to them that way, too. Like, if I told you that you're actually propping Trump up and helping him in 2020, would it get you to stop this? No. No, it won't. So here, if you see this, Michael, right? So here is the clip from the Washington Post. It says Maddow has been the most visible television personality taking on Trump during Mueller's probe. Her reports, methodical and detailed, period. That's where the sentence ends. Her reports, methodical and detailed, also completely fucking batshit crazy and conspiratorial at a nuclear level. That's where that sentence should have ended, but it didn't. And then it goes on to say, as a result of her methodical and detailed reporting, she's a target of Trump supporters seeking vindication. And that's why the Washington Post is a piece of shit, garbage fucking rag when it comes to stuff like this. And that's why they should have to be forced to be sold from the world's richest man. This is unbelievable that they're writing this. She committed journalistic malfeasance on such an unbelievable astronomical scale that if there was any justice in this world, Rachel Maddow would be in journalistic prison with a life sentence, no parole. And here is the Washington Post saying that she's a victim of Americans who are rightly upset with her gaslighting and fucking lying to them and doing a red baiting conspiracy theory with the #1 platform in cable news for 2.5 years, and she's a victim. Do you see that?
I agree with you, obviously, Jimmy, that Rachel Maddow is just an unconscionable. I don't have the words to describe how abhorrent she is. I mean, it really escapes me as to how best to encapsulate the contempt and disgust that I feel for her. At the same time, I do feel that there's a potential that she'll be scapegoated in the sense that she'll be held up as the most egregious example of Russiagate fantastical conspiracy theorizing. And while that's true, that's an accurate description of her, they'll use her to kind of absolve themselves of responsibility as well. So the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, NBC News, Mother Jones, the Daily Beast, all these kind of Twitter propagandists, they'll all say, okay, let's sacrifice Rachel as the most prominent example of like overreach on this topic, and then we get away with all scrutiny. No. Think of the investigative reportorial resources just from the New York Times and Washington Post alone that were utterly squandered investigating this non-story. Every week, you remember this, there was a bombshell story that ricocheted across Twitter, was going to be the game changer or the smoking gun.
Walls are closing in, tipping point.
Washington Post. Right, the walls are closing in. The New York Times just broke another story. Oh my God, this is it for Trump. He's going to be, removed from office within 48 hours or something.
He's gone. He's done.
No. And that was a form of fraud, as well. You know why? Because yes, while the New York Times was doing reporting that was more fact-based than Rachel for the most part, they were investigating something that fundamentally did not exist. So the bombshells that they uncovered were not bombshells at all.
No.
They were this confabulated mirage that was foisted on the American public to give them the faulty impression that there was something frenetic and exciting going on that could lead to Trump's downfall. It was a lie. It was never true. And it was so damaging in part because the journalistic resources that could have been expended on doing something useful for the country, such as, investigating a defense contractor that were agitating for the bombing of Syria or the overthrow of the government of Venezuela or trying to undermine Trump, one of the few good things Trump has done, meaning his negotiations with Kim in North Korea. None of that was investigated because all the resources were sucked into this kind of wind tunnel of Russia frenzy, and it didn't amount to anything at all. None of these bombshells were important. They seemed important at the time because they had, salacious headlines, and it seemed like it had some significance, but it didn't. And that's what this little group of Russia skeptics, that's what we were saying all along. Every single one of those bombshells, when you put them under the microscope, or you applied a modicum of critical scrutiny, you knew that it wasn't what it was being made out to be.
So we should have.
It's a real shame.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's a real shame because we need a vibrant journalism industry in this country. We need independent reporters and analysts. And I just started a Patreon and a podcast and my own independent thing recently. I'm not soliciting contributions. People can give if they want. That's great. I'm just saying that in principle, we need people who have independence of mind in this country or else we're screwed. And Trump Russia is you couldn't get a more vivid example of that than Trump Russia. So for all these journalists and all these careerist little freaks to have perpetrated the gigantic fraud that they did, and now they're trying to run away from it after 72 hours or however long it's been. No, you're not getting away with it. I don't know if I can personally hold them all accountable. I probably can't, but I'm going to damn sure try because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. That's how enormous a disservice I really genuinely feel they did.
Next live Jimmy Dore show is June 5th. That's a Wednesday at Hermosa Beach Comedy Club in Hermosa Beach, California. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets. We might be coming to your town. And if you love the show, please become a patron. Please support the show. We give you hours of bonus material every week. And please click that bell and make sure you're subscribed. Even if you think you are already subscribed, they unsubscribe people every day. Just check. Thanks for your support.